Welcome to a
Hi.
Yoga Assets conversation. Today I am speaking with Ashley Finley. Ashley is just an amazing person, and I'm super excited for all of you to get to know Ashley. Ashley is a student of Yoga Assets not only one time but two times. Ashley has done a couple of our programs, which we'll let her tell you about in a bit. But another really cool thing about Ashley is that she's a doula. She helps bring lives into the world every day for a living. She's also a community activist, and we're here to talk about the role that yoga can play in race and racism, specifically in Utah. This is our community, and we are a very white state. There are not a lot of people of color. And so it's just really been on my heart as a yoga teacher and a trainer of yoga teachers to open my ears, to open my mind, and to open the spaces around me to invite, to be more inclusive and invite more people of color. So I'm reaching out to friends like Ashley who have been so kind and just generous to give us some time around this issue. So thanks, Ashley, for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
It's just a pleasure. It's so great to see you.
Yeah.
So I always start these little interviews with this quick question of how did yoga find you?
Oh, so it's so interesting because for years, I would kind of like dabble with the idea of starting a yoga practice. And I remember maybe a year or so after I graduated from college, I was dealing with some injuries, like some back injuries and hip injuries. And one of my friends told me, she's like, I started yoga and that helped my chronic, back pain. And I think that you could really benefit. But I was really kind of tied up in this idea of what a yogi is or like what they look like, And so I was like, I'm not sure that's for me, And so it took me many, many years, and I would go to a class every once in a while at a yoga studio, and then I'd feel really like weird and just kind of uncomfortable, and also I would feel like unknowledgeable, and so I got really intimidated, and then I would leave, and then like when I started gaining weight, I would go to classes and like go and try to hide in the back of the class and still look at everyone, and I'm like, none of these people look like me. Like, so then I started receiving this kind of message, this unintentional message, that yoga was not for someone who looked like me. And at the time I was already dealing with just kind of feeling like betrayed by my body. This happened after I had a failed pregnancy. And so I was dealing with all of that, and then I was dealing with my own relationship with my body and feeling betrayed and not trusting it, and then going to a class where everyone seemed to be like really in tune with their bodies, and then they also like looked like the way I used to look, like body stature wise, and did things that I was no longer able to do. And I just was so disconnected and intimidated. But then I made a decision that I was going to try to start practicing at home, like where I could be by myself, and I could not be perfect, and I could look crazy and silly, uh, and I would do that. So I just started like yoga videos on YouTube and would look up like the most gentle practices I could find and start that way. And then I found Jessamine Stanley, who is a queer, fat, Black yoga teacher, educator, personality, and who is so honest. And so I was really drawn to her because, one, she looked like me. I mean, like body shape, you know, skin color. We had a shared experience, but then also she's very honest, you know, and even when she's teaching, she's like, all right, look, I don't know, happy baby, you know, happy baby, I get gas, you know, and that's okay. And she's like walking you through it. And she's like, it's okay to make noises. It's okay to have discomfort and to speak that into the space. And I think that's really when I fell in love, like, with yoga, because I started understanding then that what I had thought yoga was not at all what it was, and that I did have a place, like, in this practice. Yeah.
I love that you named her as someone that really welcomed you into yoga. And it's heartbreaking to me, who, you know, I'm someone who spends my life teaching yoga, and the whole framework of our business is make yoga a yes for everyone. And
Right.
it breaks my heart to know, not just to think, but to know that we're not living up to that. You know, you came
Right.
in with back pain, you came in with a relationship with your body that you were looking to improve. All of, you know, those are things that yoga promises to help with.
Mm-hmm.
And the very things you were there seeking, like, you couldn't get because you didn't feel like you fit in or didn't feel comfortable. So through this conversation, I would love to see if we can pinpoint some of the things that maybe could have been done differently
Yeah.
by the practitioners in the room, the yoga teacher, and by the studios. You know,
Yes.
I think we can really serve the world by just teasing out some of those things. But I also want to say, if we get even to a higher level, Jessamine Stanley, there was a whole controversy about her and the cover of Yoga Journal.
Yeah.
And that is a really heartbreaking story as well, where they called her to be photographed on the cover of Yoga Journal, and when it came out, they made two different copies, right? Two different
Right.
covers.
Yes, I remember seeing that, and I read into it a little bit, but I remember she was, like, very hurt and upset and angry. And wasn't it like, one of them was, like, more photoshopped than the other? Is that what it was?
I'm sure some of that happened as well, but what I heard was that they also created a cover to come out at the same time as hers, with the owner of Yoga Works, a thin white yoga teacher,
Right,
and they
right.
were selective about who got which copy.
Right,
They
okay, yes.
they didn't send Jessamine's copy everywhere, and so that was just another slap in the face. I just listened to a podcast called White Women Killed Yoga, and it just really talks about things like that. And, like, to your experience of, I didn't see myself in that room, and it took you a long time to kind of find someone that made you feel comfortable. So
It
I'd like
really,
to just kind of point to some of those. Ashley, how long have you lived in Utah?
I've been here now for about 7 years.
And
That's
you're from
crazy to say.
California.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Southern California. I kind of grew up in, like, Los Angeles, like East LA, and then went to high school in the high desert, and college back down in like Pasadena area, if anyone knows where those
Yeah.
places are.
Yeah. And then you made your way out to Utah. So, what is it like being a person of color in the
Yeah.
state of Utah?
Oh, it's I will say that it's a lot better now than it was when I first came here. When I first came to Utah, I felt very alone. I didn't I was in a culture shock, actually, because I grew up around, like, so many different cultures and ethnicities, to the point where I was pretty fluent in Spanish, like, growing up, and you know, like shopped at like, you know, Asian markets and shopped at the Mexican markets and stuff, and, you know, had neighbors. You know, we were all just kind of intermingling, like doing this thing called life together, right? And figuring it out in our communities together. And then I came to Utah, and it was so hard. Like, one, the biggest thing that was really hard for me was the availability of like certain food choices, and also like skin and hair care was a big thing. And it's a lot better now, because I think that Utah is growing, especially as a transplant state, where people are kind of getting pushed out of New York or Los Angeles or Seattle or wherever, you know. And I found a community here that makes me feel at home, and we're all, again, transplants from other places, and we bring those other places with us, and it just feels warm and feels at home. But I will say that largely it can be frustrating. It can be frustrating because one, the state, and I don't want to get into it too much, but politically, right, the state doesn't often lend itself to like legislation or political resources that like are more in line with like the livelihood of people of color, right? And then also, just if you're not a transplant here and you grew up in Utah, a lot of times you didn't grow up with a Black person, like knowing a Black person or knowing a person of color. Or if you did, there was like, I've heard so many of these stories, like there was only one person of color in my entire high school, and, you know, and so you don't, I feel that in a lot of ways people don't know how to interact with people of color, and they either like avoid us or are terrible to us, or they tokenize us, which is another edge of that sword, you know?
Yeah, I have a Black friend.
Exactly.
I'm not racist. I have a Black friend. And
Exactly.
I'm going to be so transparent here with you and tell you that you just described me. So I grew up here. I've been here my entire life. First of all, I want to say thank you for bringing some more culture and some more diversity into what I would call a very like Wonder Bread state.
Right.
To me, that's boring. I've been able to travel enough that I thrive on differences. I really love just color and culture, and like you said, foods that are different than macaroni and cheese and funeral casserole, which I do love. But you know, I went to a high school of there were 4,000 students, South Jordan, Utah, and to my knowledge, we didn't have any people of color.
Wow.
I mean, so it was probably, I did some traveling as a child with my grandparents. We went to Philadelphia, New York, and that was my experience with people of color, but it wasn't where I grew up and where I lived. So I am grateful, and my kids are grateful that there are transplants here and that our state is changing. And I hope that means some changes in legislation, and that we can make this a place where we can all thrive.
Right. Yes.
That's the hope. So with yoga, Ashley, we were talking about this before we started this recording, but Black Lives Matter. And right now there's this whole Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter thing going on. And I'm seeing a lot in social media of yogis specifically saying all lives matter. We are one, namaste, union. Yoga means we are all the same. We are all this divine nature. How can we get better at this conversation as yogis if we believe that we really are from the same source? We are all the same at a deep and soul level. We are all highly valued. How do we have the Black Lives Matter conversation as a yogi and be really true to yoga?
Right. I think in its nature, having the the conversation is inherently being true to yoga, because what I understand, at least in my learning and thank you, Yoga Assets, and my my research, is that, like, the idea, right, is to bring this sense of unity and to bring this kind of enlightenment and awakening towards the fact that, yes, we are all like children of the divine, right? Like, whatever your divine is, we're all that. We're related. We inhabit this earth together. Therefore, we should have a collective compassion for each other. And so when I think of that goal, or when I think of that truth, then it's hard for me to, and it's also hard for me as a Black woman, right? But it's hard for me to say, even of issues of injustice that don't necessarily like seem to affect me, right? Like, we can talk about the crisis and the atrocities that ICE are committing against migrants, right? Like, we can talk about that. I've born in America. It doesn't necessarily seem to affect me, but I see like my immigrant neighbors and my immigrant family and brothers and sisters, and I say, they are part of this earth just like I am, right? And so I have no problem speaking about that, because my goal is to get everyone to understand that these people are children of the divine, just like you and I are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so if that's the case, if we want this like beautiful, harmonious, collective, worldly, global village where everyone gets to live in peace and harmony, then that means we have to be really honest about the instances where that isn't happening, and when we're not seeing that, because we can't fix it and we can't make it better until we recognize it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I believe it was Audre Lorde who said, I'm not free until all of us are free, and that, like, I'm not living in harmony and peace until all of us are. And so I think that's it.
I think you're so spot on. And this whole, it feels like right now we're so polarized, and I'm sure it's because it's an election year and it's them and us. It feels like literally you take every issue that we're arguing about right now, including mask or no mask, and
Mm-hmm.
all of those issues are getting shoved over here. And so over here is like, I'm going to wear a mask, and Black Lives Matter, and like all of this is over here. And then over here is, it's a conspiracy. Like, we're so divided. We've been divided for a long time, but it's just, we've got the technology now to see the division right in front of our eyes.
Right.
And so I just love what I keep reading and hearing, that all lives, all lives matter when Black Lives Matter.
Right.
And right now that's the child that's hurting. That's the person in the family that's hasn't been invited fully to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's work to do.
Yeah, and I think it's so important. I think that it's okay. It's not only okay, it's necessary for us to be honest about what's happening. And it's not nice, and it's not easy, and it doesn't feel good to talk about the fact that, like, Black and Indigenous and brown people are just getting killed for no reason, except for that they exist, And it doesn't feel good to talk about that, but also it doesn't feel good to live it either. And so I'd rather live in a world where we talk about it, right? We talk about it, we address it, and we fix it, even if that means like going through all of the heart, like all of the grief and all of the messiness and the ugliness. If we get through that and build something better on the other side, like, I'm more than willing to do it, you know? Like, I'm more than willing to do it. And I think as yogis, we have to be willing to do it. We can't spiritually bypass this, you know?
Right. We can't namaste our way out of this one.
Right. Right.
Especially if it's a bumper sticker and then in the meantime we're flipping people off. Like you
Right.
know, like namaste has to be something that we live. I am certain, and I know I can validate this with lots of research, that in your position, it's exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
It's exhausting to just fight the fight that you've been fighting your whole life, basically.
Right.
Maybe even more right now, but exhausting to have people like me constantly because, you know, back to that tokenization thing, I know one Black person and like, teach me, educate me. I'm getting that we have to do our work. Like there's plenty of resources out there. We've got to go get up Google, you know, pull up Google.
Right.
There are plenty of movies to watch. There are plenty of books to read, and those lists are out there. We don't need to keep coming to you to educate us. That's my job. And I get that. And I'm willing to stand in the place of helping my white friends have resources. Let's take that
Right.
off you. Like, let's let you continue to do what you do and fight your fight. And someone said, white people, we need you to be the Walmart greeter. We need you to be the nice person at the door and like welcome your friends in and hand them a
Right.
book and like give them something to think about. So I really get that, Ashley. And again, I'm incredibly grateful for your time and your generosity, because I feel like this yoga thing, of course, that's where we meet.
Right.
I feel like we're getting it wrong. I feel like that we're not living our yoga right now as a community. So I just want to know if you have any thoughts about like, what can we do better? What can our studios do to be more inclusive?
Yeah. And that's such a hard question, right? Like, one thing is like, it's so hard because when I think of yoga, and I've been thinking about this question for a while, I'm like, what are some things, like actionable items, right? Like, that we can do to make yoga inclusive. And I think one is amplifying voices of yogis who don't necessarily like look, you know, like they're not the Instagram yogis that we know, right? Like let's amplify people of color as they teach, you know. That means getting some people of color in your studios, hiring them, you know. Also, let's offer like affordable classes. This is like, I promise you, Denise, like besides the representation thing, besides the representation, like people saying like, I just don't feel like yoga's for me because I don't fit into what the mold of a yogi looks like, you know?
Yeah.
Financial gatekeeping is the next one, and I can vouch to that because I would not have been able to practice regularly in a studio if I hadn't decided to be a karma yogi, meaning like if I hadn't donated time basically to a front desk or cleaning a studio, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that. Don't get me wrong, I'm grateful that I was able to access that. But also it feels a little like, ugh, you know, like when you're just like, I literally just want to do yoga in your space. And I understand people have bills to pay, but when you're charging like so much money for some person to come, like a drop-in is $20, you know, like at most studios, and that's not necessarily affordable, you know.
But it's not at all. That's a very affluent activity that someone can pay $20 for 1 hour class.
Right.
And that makes it inaccessible right there. And you know, Ashley, we don't own studios. Our mission is to take yoga where it isn't.
Right. Yeah.
So it sounds to me like we need, in addition to making studios more accessible and people of color friendly, we need to get yoga into the communities where people are. I think
agree.
transportation could even be an issue.
Yes. That
you
is
know.
an issue. You're exactly right. I think like if you, as a person who has like a yoga platform, you know, so like even if you don't own a studio, I think being able to, like you said, go into the community. Denise, that was one of the reasons I remember pretty much like the first email I sent you. That was, and I chose yoga assets because I felt like, you know, I'm always like a little weary when I see like like not to be rude, but when I see a blonde white woman, like, you know, I'm always like, okay, like,
Yeah.
but but I read through, you know, and I had been referred to you and I read through your information and I said, okay, like this at least is something that I feel good about participating in, you know, and you were so helpful. And I think that that really testifies to like what a yogi is and what it means to live our yoga, because here I am, right? Like this person, like I said, who had not really practiced in a yoga studio so much until I got, you know, until I was able to kind of do work exchange. And I remember telling you, like, I want to be able to do this training because I want to be able then to turn around and take my training and teach the people in my community who don't have access, who can't pay $20 or who can't drive up to Sugar House or, you know, wherever it is.
Yeah.
My folks who are living in West Valley City and Rose Park in Glendale, like, I want to be able to take this to them and say, this is yours too. Like, you deserve to access and tap into this healing, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think that that's it. Like, let's get some Black and Brown and Indigenous folks in these trainings. Let's you know, let's take these trainings into these parts of the city where people are probably not even fathoming. Like in my most recent, you know, training with Yoga Forward, I had a friend there who I've made, and they were just like, I'm not sure this is for me, but they stayed and they finished, and now I'm like, that's one more person. That's one more person that gets to access this for themselves. Maybe they may not ever feel comfortable going to a studio. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. You know, maybe they may not ever feel comfortable going to a studio, but they're like, you know, I can hit that pigeon pose right here on my and I can tell people who look like me in a language that they understand, here's how you do a downward dog, or here's how you stretch out your hamstrings, or you know what I mean? So it's beautiful and it's revolutionary, and I'm just like, I've been exhausted, but when I think of this, I'm thinking like, if at the very least we can do is get people tuned into their bodies, something that they've been historically taught to be disconnected from, because it's dangerous to be in a Black fat body, you know, in a predominantly white state. It's dangerous. But if I can at least have an hour a day where I can sit with my body and say, and give my body the love and let it feel loved and let it feel inhabited, then that's revolutionary.
So beautiful,
Sorry
Ashley.
about
And
that.
that is exactly what you brought to your training with Yoga Assets, that you embody that. You were so authentic with us from the very first day. We started breaking down poses and you were just so like open and willing to, you know, ask questions but also offer, and you would just say, wait a minute, that doesn't work in this body. Can you show me another way? And I mean, I just wish everyone was, you know, comfortable asking, because there are things that just like weren't on my radar. And obviously I would be like, oh yeah, well here. And it helped me so much to be able to be a better teacher to people with larger bodies, right? To people who didn't feel comfortable in that space. So I would love nothing more. And I want to go on record with you right now to say, I commit that we will take these programs into the communities that you just talked about. Whatever that looks like. Yoga Forward can get the funding to take these programs there. And I'm not sure I'm the right person to deliver the training based on me being a white woman in Utah. Maybe you can help us with that.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and I definitely want to work with you on creating a module for all of our teacher trainings around inclusivity and helping us be better at exactly what we're talking about. That's my commitment to
Thank you,
you.
Denise. Thank
To
you.
you. Yeah.
I like, you know, I will tell you this, like, it was so powerful when, and I'm like gonna get a little bit teary-eyed because when I tell you, like, it's been hard. It's been really hard. And like, sometimes like I go into my living room and, you know, before like the calls of the day start, like, or I tap into the news, I go into my living room and I sit there like again in like butterfly or pigeon pose, and I will just like breathe it out because it's so hard to imagine. Well, I don't know, never mind, I'm gonna rephrase that. It's hard to be in a body that's constantly wired for trauma, right? And wired to be like on alert and be stressed, right? And so when I was able to like first start teaching with Yoga Assets, you know, our 10 hours of volunteer teaching, I saw the power in it. And I'm not saying that like to kind of uplift myself. Like I just saw how beautiful it was for me to go into Rose Park and say, come, like, just come here, just for this hour, just be with me, let's be together. And you can feel however you feel. You can take it, you can leave it, you can cry, you can breathe, you can laugh, whatever. Because I know like your whole day is spent around like hustling and surviving, right? Like your whole day is spent around how do I make it in this world financially? How do I make it in this world, like just in general? Like, how do I stay alive? How do I keep my babies alive? How do I, you know, all of that. Like, no, for an hour, you come here. And if that means if you want to lay on your back in Shavasana or in child's pose for the entire time, you do what you need to do because I'm holding this space. And it was beautiful and powerful and and I started like the Black Healing Through movement when all of this started, like with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, and just being able to be in that space, even though it's virtual, you know, but like saying, okay, for an hour, we're not looking at this Black death. Like for an hour, we can escape it, you know.
Is that something you're leading, or is that a program you're participating in?
Yeah. So it's mine.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And it's just been virtual.
Yeah, so it's just been on Zoom. I'm really excited about that. I've only done it, like we have another one coming up on Sunday, and I was just taking donations for a local Black mom, and then her mom who is in Sierra Leone, who's dealing with a lot of financial issues right now because they're on lockdown. They've had natural disasters. She's lost her job. So, you know, but
yeah.
So yeah, I've just been doing that, and that's been really nice. And
That's amazing.
And I'm really grateful. Again, see, this is like the seeds that, you know, like you being willing to say, okay, we're going to do this, Denise, is so powerful because I can't even imagine, or I can't even tell you, like, how many times I've tried to talk to yoga instructors or studio owners or people who have schools and just tried to be like, hey, just so you know, here's some resources that you can access, you know, just to make you maybe a little bit more culturally competent, you know, and have been like shot down. Like, I think I told you one of the instances, but yeah, like have just been ignored, or like, no, we don't need to do that. I'm like, you do though, you really do.
And, you know, maybe for the moment, that's the wrong audience. You know, maybe
Mm-hmm.
we're trying to put a square peg in a round hole, and we're trying to open a studio that clearly is created for white people of
Mm-hmm.
affluence, you know, that
Mm-hmm.
live on the east side of Salt Lake City. Maybe that's the business model. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe we need to see a bigger picture, and we need to take yoga where it isn't.
Where it isn't.
And we're just finishing up the program for the LGBTQ community. We've got
Yeah.
a graduation coming up, which is super exciting. But
Yeah.
as soon as we're done with that, we're ready to create a new program.
Yeah.
And I would love for you to somehow, I know you're exhausted and you're busy, but I would love for you to be as involved in that as you can be and would like to be, and help us put the right people in place.
Yes.
What's coming up for me right now is we have several people who have graduated from our prison program, and they're now out here and they're looking for places and ways to teach and contribute in the community. And I feel like that would
Amazing.
be a wonderful service opportunity for them. So
Yes.
it just feels like it, I think it can come together. And I know our Yoga Assets community will support us. So that makes me really excited that we might be able to make a difference in that way.
Yes, I would love to be involved and to help, because I'm so passionate about it. Yeah, I feel privileged that I was able to like access again this healing and access the training. And so I want to be able to turn around and just like plug that right back in, you know, to the community. So please, yeah, I'd love to help.
Okay, well, more to come on that. That sounds like another episode for us to get back on and talk about our program once we've got some design around it. But let's see how, let's kind of start to wrap up here. We've got a few
Mhm.
minutes left. How can I be a better ally?
I think, and that question again is always really hard. I think that I think you're doing great. I think as long as you stay open, right, to educating yourself and also standing up in the, like, just saying, what do they always say? If you see something, say something. Like, you know, having those tough conversations, you know, having those really hard conversations with friends and family or whoever, people that you just know in the neighborhood, whoever, you know, and not being afraid. Because I will say it is 100% safer for you to speak up than it is for someone like myself, you know. And so if you are willing to do that, that's wonderful, because unfortunately, as much as I hate it, unfortunately, like the white people saying it is validating this movement and the larger, you know, the larger gaze, you know. And so and I think that's like where we had a, like, why we didn't make so much progress before, because it wasn't, you know, this large majority of like white folks like jumping in and saying, no, this is wrong. It was just kind of us screaming into the void, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
And so now I'm like, just keep being loud, keep amplifying our voices, keep doing this, keep holding this platform, you know, keep reading, keep watching those movies.
Yeah, I am on it. I've got one queued up every night tonight. It's Queen and Slim.
Yes. Okay. I'm really excited for you. Please tell me how you like it.
All right. I've may never forgive you for having me watch Rosewood, but it was necessary. That was really painful to watch. But
Yeah.
not as painful as it was for people to live it, and is, I think, still for many people to live it.
Yeah.
At least I can do is put myself through 2 hours of discomfort of watching someone else's story.
Right.
Um, I would, what I would request on the other side of this as an ally is patience.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing that I've been asking of our trans friends, people that are in transition, like, be patient with us. If I'm trying so hard, with the pronouns, and
Yeah.
I am going to screw up. Um, and I ask for patience, and I ask for to be corrected when I do get it wrong, because that's the only way I'll know how to get it right. I don't want white people to have to walk on eggshells. I don't think that's the way that we come up with real communication. But I also think we have to be open to knowing that this is new territory for a lot of us, and we don't have all of the language right. We're going to fumble through this
Yeah.
and probably make mistakes and say things wrong. But I hope that I was just telling you, I think a month ago, I was saying all lives matter. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know. That sounded very yoga and unicorn and rainbows to me.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
now I know. And once you know better, you have to do better. So
Right.
I appreciate you, that you're always patient with me. And I remember a few instances in yoga teacher training where you very softly and kindly just corrected something that was sounding not inclusive. And
Yeah.
that's all we can ask of each other, I think.
Yes, I think you're right. I think it's hard. I know, and I know it's hard. I'll say this like on record. I know it's hard to be patient, but I think once you find I think there is a difference, right? Like I also want to name that and be honest about that, right? There's a difference between, Denise Drews, who grew up in all white Utah and didn't have one person of color in her school, and is working towards this understanding, right? And then there's a difference between, someone else who's just saying all lives matter to be antagonistic, right? And I think that you'll find those people, like that's why it's easier to be patient, because it's like, okay, I understand, like where this is coming from. You're literally not just trying to discredit my life, like you're genuinely made a mistake,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
growing is messy, and we all do it in different ways,
Yeah. 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 Maybe we can all be patient as long as we know someone's really sincerely trying,
right.
and open to change, open to growth. It is hard to be patient with so much of what we see right now, people just digging in their heels and
Right.
not willing to look at anything. So yeah, that's a great clarification.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Ashley, I just want to thank you for all that you contribute to the world. Um, you're a poet and spoken word. I'm not sure, performer.
Yeah.
Is that how you would
Yeah.
say that?
Yeah. You can
You you've done some really amazing work around that. You are a really beautiful yoga teacher with a huge heart.
thank
Um,
you.
you are so passionate about your work as a doula and a community activist. I feel just grateful to know you, to have you in my life, and so grateful for this time that you've taken to just speak to anyone who might be willing to listen to this.
Yes, thank you so much, Denise. I appreciate you so much, and I'm grateful for you, and grateful for you having me on.
Okay. Anything else? Any final words before we take off?
No, I guess, can I do a shameless plug? Is that okay?
Please do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So I do have a Patreon that I set up specifically kind of for this, like for teaching and providing resources around anti-racism, like confronting the racism around you and in yourself. And so if anybody would like more information or would like to support me on Patreon, they can do that. And that's just patreon.com/findingfinley. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll make sure when we post this, we'll make sure to include that link.
Okay.
And that absolutely happy to support you in whatever way we can.
Thank you so much, Denise. I appreciate you.
Well, honestly, like from my heart, the deepest place of my heart, when I say namaste, I really do see you and I see your light, and I love you, and I'm just thankful for you. So
I love you too. Thank you.
have an amazing rest of your day, and we'll talk soon about our new project.
Okay, perfect. You too. You too.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.